Welcome, football stalkers. It's your boy, the master tactician fan, Koza Ivan, and I am joined by Nqobile and Ndlovu. Look, this is a special episode where we're going to be looking at the financials of the PSL. We're going to be looking at what needs to be done to improve the PSL. Let the man himself introduce himself. Nqobile, do the honors, my brother.
Mr. Koza, my name is Nqobile Ndlovu. I'm a football fan. I'm a sports fan. I like the financial side of sports. So yeah, I've been playing around and looking at the details of the financials of the PSL, SAFA. I looked at the recent ABSA deal. And yeah, I'm looking into other sports as well. But yeah, I just do a little bit of playing around with. This is a hobby of mine. It's not a profession. I'm a digital strategist by trade, but this is just me. I'm just a guy who likes football and other sports and likes to find out about the financial details of how these sports work.
Okay. I know you have a disclaimer that you put out. Let's start with that so that people know. Go ahead. I think it should be your line.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, before I dive in, I'm not an auditor. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a statistician. I'm not a financial journalist. I do this for fun. I do this information is publicly available. I didn't steal it. I didn't go on on anyone's emails and draw this information. All of this information is publicly available, and if anyone wants to look it up, they can go and look it up themselves just to verify what I'm saying.
Good stuff. Now let's dive right into it. Obviously, we know that in the current season, the chairman of the PSL, Dr. Ivan Koza, announced that the PSL has obviously made a revenue of over R1 billion, which
correct.
Which for many was a positive thing. That obviously signified that the league is growing. But if you look at the finer detail, obviously there's some concerns that one sees from the balance sheets and all those. Now, I know from your breakdown, you looked at, basically you took obviously the revenue. Now, to basically simplify it to all the viewers and all those guys, is that revenue includes cost. And as much as it's good to have your turnover and all that, but it's also important to look at the cost of that, to then look at, from a business point of view, how much profit are you making. Now, Nqobile here, he did a breakdown and he's going to explain it to me. My guy, please take us through the breakdown of what actually is going on with the brand that Dr. Ivan Koza announced.
Sure. Dr. Ivan Koza confirmed last year that the PSL, the league, had made over R1 billion in revenue. In actual fact, the amount, they didn't specify the amount, but the amount was R1 billion, 845,732 rand.
Mm-hmm.
That was the total amount that they made. However, if you look at the income statement, the comprehensive income statement says that the expenditure was a total of R1 billion, 20,349,000. So they actually spent 20 million more than the R1 billion that they had made. In total, their net income, if you take into account sponsorships and assets and so on, in total, their net income was only 64,438 rand. That's what they had in the bank at the end of the year, which was at the end of the financial year. That was June 2019. So it paints a picture that says, you can't survive if at the end of the year, you only have 64,000 rand as the South African Premier League. You can't survive on that. It just goes to show that coronavirus is showing that the situation is unsustainable.
Yeah.
You can't, if you have a situation like this that happens, fine, people didn't expect that it would happen, but it happened. And we're in a situation now where there's been no football for over 2 months. And the league is continuing apparently to pay the grants to the clubs every month. I don't know how. We also just lost a sponsor in ABSA as well, so that's also going to cause problems. But we'll get into that later, I assume.
Yeah, well, let's touch base a little bit on the cash reserves, and obviously this is aligned with the sustainability of the business itself.
Correct.
Now, you did paint the picture that it's obviously a company that generates R1 billion revenue should not be having 64,000 cash reserves. It should be way more than that, way more. And look, obviously, as much as we appreciate the, let's say, the fact that they're coming out and we're able to access information such as, how much money is coming in and how much they're spending and stuff like that, but it needs to be more detailed. So, I mean, looking at that, what do you think needs to be done in order to improve the cash reserves of the PSL?
Well, it's difficult because the business model of the PSL is that the PSL is a non-profit making organization. So in their defense, they say that we are an NPO. All of the money that we get in, we then use either for for grants towards the league, for the maintenance of the league, which is putting together matches and so on and so on. So according to them, they're an NPO. According to them, they should not be making profit. However, it's not sustainable because you find yourself in a situation like this now, where if, for instance, one of the sponsors, apart from ABSA, were to pull out and say we can't financially afford this, we would then have a bigger problem. So in my opinion, the model overall needs to change from an NPO to a league that is actually geared towards being financially sustainable and actually making money, so that if you ever have a situation like this happening again, you have the financial means and the reserves to actually tackle that. If you look at a league like, for instance, Germany, the Bundesliga has very strict rules for clubs. The clubs have to be financially stable. The clubs cannot go and spend, even in Germany, things like financial fair play. The only teams that really have big money in Germany are teams like Bayern Munich. The rest of them are clubs that buy players and they try and sell at a profit. Even the league itself is very financially stable and sustainable, and you are not getting situations where the league is about to break down, although they have started again, but they're much more financially stable. Another league that's, for example, is the MLS in America. And in the MLS, they've got salary caps. You can't pay players over what you can actually afford. That then means that the clubs are financially sustainable. Because the clubs are financially sustainable, the entire league is financially sustainable and financially viable. They were saying that the MLS is set to make a loss of, I think, $2 billion. But even then, the MLS isn't shutting down. The clubs themselves, because of the way that the league is structured, are still financially viable, and they've been able to withstand the pressures of coronavirus until now. So I don't know what the case would be with South African teams, because unfortunately no South African teams release financial results. You can't find the financial results of Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates, even Mamelodi Sundowns. You can't find the financial results of those teams because they're not listed entities, and they do not put out their financial results. So it's very difficult.
Yeah, touching on, you spoke about obviously the Bundesliga. Now we know that in Europe, the EPL is number one when it comes to obviously revenue and profits and all that. And when you're looking at number two spot, it's obviously between La Liga and the Bundesliga. So there's always the competition between the two, and obviously touching on the fact that those two leagues, or basically majority of the top leagues in Europe, are sustainable. And you also touched on obviously the MSL as well, given the fact that they have a wage cap, and you look at obviously UEFA have their own FIFA Fair Play. Now, touching a little bit on the FIFA Fair Play. Now we understand the policy that it's there. Basically the idea behind FIFA Fair Play is to have sustainable clubs. They don't want to find themselves in situations where clubs are spending more than what they should, given obviously the turnover and all the financial surrounding the club. Now you understand that, and that's fair. Do you think that something similar to that will be introduced? Because yes, we are talking about the PSL has to change from being an NGO, because that's what it is. I mean, you can't. That's like almost playing safe when you say you're an NGO. PSL is a money making machine. I mean, the fact that you look at, let's say, Super Sport is paying about 600 million for that. That tells you that there's potential in it. You're looking at APSA and all those that have basically come on board to become sponsors of the PSL. So then they need to change that structure. They need to change that model into being a business that is there to make money. And then probably changes the whole complexity of how they probably will negotiate for contracts and all that.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult thing to say, because whether they'll change or not. I mean, the PSL has been the way it's been since inception, and I mean I don't want to speculate and talk about what decisions will be made by Dr. Ivan Koza and so on and so on. Those are their decisions to make. However, what I will say is that the PSL has shown that they can make money. I mean, to make R1 billion in revenue is not a small thing to do. If you commercialize the product more and you send it out to more people, you potentially have a much bigger net of clients, and therefore sponsors will come on board. I mean, for SuperSport to be paying 600 million rand a year for broadcast rights, they're also then involved through the multi-choice Diski Challenge, which is extra expenditure. That's a lot of money every year. APSA has gone, but I'm pretty sure that the PSL will find a sponsor. It's just been made a little bit more complicated now by this coronavirus situation, but I'm sure that they'll find another sponsor to fill that gap. There's other sponsors who have also come on board. Burger King was there through Taste Holdings. There's the deal with outsurance for the referees, etc., etc. So all of these things are basically showing you that the PSL is a money-making organization, and they can make more money if they wanted to. And there are things like digital streaming, for instance. We currently, if you're a subscriber or if you're a watcher of the PSL, you can't go onto the PSL website and go and stream highlights of games, for instance, if you wanted to. That's an extra revenue model that they could go with. Yes, the PSL can definitely be profitable, and they can change their model to make themselves, because right now as a non-profit organization, I think they do that so that they don't have to be as transparent in terms of their financial dealings. They do release financial statements, but they could be a lot more detailed. They're not forced to release the extent of financial details that they do right now, because they're not a publicly listed entity. But as an NPO, you have to release some sort of financials. But either way, they could tap into other revenue streams as well. There's digital marketing, which they are not currently doing as much of. They own the digital content. However, right now only SuperSport has access to that content. The SABC does as well, but the SABC is struggling financially. They even had to renegotiate, down to about 50 million from initially having been paying about 150 million a year. So it's very difficult for the SABC right now to come in as a broadcaster. But either way, SuperSport owns, a bulk of this content, and it shouldn't be that way. The league themselves should be in a position where if you're a consumer and you want to view maybe highlights of games or exclusive content on the league, you should be able to see that stuff on the league's pages and not have to go to a SuperSport for you to get that content.
Now,
there's other ways.
Sorry to cut in a bit. Let's now touching base on that. Let's look at, for instance, the Barclays, the way, because I see a lot of similarities in how we do things to the Barclays as well, in terms of equally distributing money to all the teams participating in the PSL and all that. But there are certain differences, and how come that when you look at, let's say, for instance, the sponsorship, why are we limiting ourselves with sponsorship? Why aren't we having sponsors for everything? Why don't we have a ball sponsor? I mean, the Barclays have Nike. We've seen La Liga have Nike, and others have Adidas or whatever. Why can't we have the same? That's money. You have a sponsorship for the ball. You have a sponsorship for the time, the one that we see 90 minutes or whatever. We have sponsorship for cars. You have sponsorship for a drink. You have sponsorship. So there's different ways of going about sponsors. And looking at the competitions that we have at the moment, it's Telkom, which is the telecommunications. You can say, but now it's Telkom. You have what you call MTN. So those are two telecom guys that are involved. You obviously have the Nedbank and Absa, two banks.
Yeah.
Now, what about the other markets that they're not exploring? Because that's more money coming in for the PSL. And
well, you're 100% right. You're 100% right in that those are other avenues that they could explore. But I can't answer that question. How the PSL decides on how they want to monetize their offering is completely up to them. All I can say is that there are other avenues that they can tap into, but I can't talk for them and how they decide to monetize their revenue. For instance, you're 100% right. There's in other leagues, you get a sponsor for the lineup. The lineup is brought to you by this and this sponsor. You get a sponsor for the water on the side of the pitch. You get a sponsorship for the ball, as you said. You get a sponsorship for a substitution. The substitution, you can see there's like Lucozade on the when the substitution thing comes up on the screen.
Sure.
I mean, there's all sorts of different things that you can monetize, and then you can take all of that content, and you can build an entire video streaming business on top of that, so that if a person missed the game, for instance, they can watch it, highlights of it digitally. You can have interviews with players digitally, and you can have a sponsor for all of that stuff. So there's all sorts of various things that we can, that we still have to learn as the league. I think the PSL is just scratching the surface of revenue generation. But the other big problem is getting people into the stadiums. Our stadiums are usually a third or maybe half full. You can't sustain getting sponsors with people not actually going to the stadiums. If you pivot your strategy towards digital content and digitizing the content so that those people who aren't going to the stadiums can still consume the content, then maybe sponsors would jump on board. But for those who want to advertise in games, in stadiums, and get those eyes on the product, it's going to be very difficult. If only about, our stadiums are never really full, apart from if you look at like a Soweto derby, or maybe a Chiefs playing a Sundowns, or Pirates playing a Sundowns. Apart from that, you hardly get full stadiums, maybe unless you go to maybe Bloemfontein.
Well,
so it's difficult for sponsors as well.
Yeah. So looking at, obviously we obviously speaking about different revenue streams that the PSL can exploit, and
Yeah.
it becomes a difficult mission if one considers that everything is aligned to sponsors need to be compelled that look, your product, you can market it, you can advertise it because there's eyes, there are people who are interested in all of this, and the stadium attendance has been an issue. Now, if we, let's say, dive deep a little bit in that, is that comparing to how football was back in the day, we're talking like in the 90s, where attendance then was never an issue. Why? When you hear people who were part of the game then, they speak about marketing was a major item in clubs. Clubs were supposed to market themselves. They were supposed to market the games. They did that very well, where people went to games. They relied on going to games to see what was going on rather than sitting in their couches and watching the game. And I think a part of why attendance is such an issue. Now we can touch on the transport. Obviously, South Africa is a different country compared to Europe, where their transporting system is advanced as compared to ours. There's obviously a cheaper way of going to stadiums using public transport, whether it's a bus or train or whatever. Whereas if you look at us, um, the country is a big country, so we don't have that infrastructure where one can just climb on a train and basically from Gauteng to KZN or wherever. Taxis are expensive, and people don't necessarily have that much money to spend on tickets and traveling, and obviously they include food and drinks and all that. But if I did this whole comparison now, ticket sales at the moment are 40 bucks, right? 40 rands. And if the obviously to the club's prerogative way, if they want to take it up, then they can do that. Now, I made a comparison that if, let's say, for instance, you have 1,000 people attending a game, so that means
Mm.
the club would make about 40,000 for that game. But
Mm.
let's say if they took the ticket prices to only 10 rand, and then
Mm.
if you were to get the same amount, 40,000, that would mean that they now, from just only having 1,000 people, now they would have about 4,000. That's more attendance in the stadium.
Mm.
And I think
Mm.
it's in the best interest of the clubs, not only the PSL, but the clubs as well, because it also becomes easier for them to also get sponsors. Because now we hear about them struggling getting sponsors because they're small clubs and all that. But once there's
Mm.
attendance in their games, where more numbers are coming in because it's easier, it's only 10 bucks. You can bring your whole family and go watch a game.
Yeah.
Then it basically changes the whole picture. And I think over the years, PSL have neglected that part of marketing. Now we know we've seen the initiative by ABSA when they're doing the penalty shootouts at games. We've seen them
Mm.
offering fans and all that. But I think
Yeah.
the PSL and the clubs needs to be hands on when it comes to a model that they need to use to market the game so that people turn up to match days.
Yeah, so I hear you on that point, but I think another factor that we haven't explored yet is the fact that a lot more people have access to TV. So right now, a lot more people have access to. If you look at multi-choices numbers in terms of people who are watching DSTV, you don't need to leave home. So that's one factor that influences it. Supersport and MultiChoice pays 600 million a year, right? Almost every household, if you go around Ekasi, people have Amadish, right? And they can watch games at home. You also then watch games on SABC because Ikasa came up with that requirement. Uguti games have to be televised on free-to-air television. And that's why the SABC had to be brought back in. That's why the CIA deal failed. So you've got a lot more people who, from comparison to back in the day, you've got a lot more people who can stay at home and watch, and they don't need a reason for them to leave. You're right, they could drop ticket prices because there were some complaints which people can't afford you know, and we're in a, let's be honest, we're in a poor country, and the majority of the fans who watch the game are not people who can afford, you know, thousands of rand every year to go and watch football. It would make sense for them to drop the prices, but that's the prerogative of the clubs. They would then have to, you know, look at their revenues and say, can we afford this? Can we mitigate the loss of that revenue against maybe sponsors, additional sponsors coming in? I mean, gate takings are an important part of revenue for clubs. And if they drop the prices, if they drop the prices, they do risk, you know, because if you drop the prices, you're not 100% guaranteed that the fans will come anyway. So you're right, the marketing has to be done to encourage people to come to the stadiums. But there's also other factors that take into account, which the clubs can't control. That requires government support in terms of making sure that safety is up to scratch. That requires stadium management. And unfortunately, a lot of clubs don't own their stadiums, so they can't further monetize what, you know, the football activities. Like, for instance, Sundowns have to sometimes share a stadium with Blue Bulls. You know, it's difficult. You know, the clubs don't have as much control. If I can guarantee you, if the clubs had owned the stadiums, if the clubs owned their stadiums and they had control of, you know, everything from you arriving at the stadium to you getting to the stadium through transport and so on, they would have much more ability to push more people towards the stadiums and to fill those stadiums. But it's more difficult because they can't control it. They have to rely on the metros for support. They have to rely on policing for support, the transport ministry, etc., etc., etc. And if those departments are not, you know, not finding value in more fans and so on, it just makes it more difficult for the clubs to get more people. So I sympathize with the clubs in this regard. It's not as easy as it may seem. There's so many moving parts.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I also need to add that I'm not saying that it's easy, but looking at, let's say...
No, I do agree with you on the marketing side and the fact that they can do more as clubs themselves. Yes. To try and get people into stadiums. I agree with you there.
Because let's say touching on the stadiums attendance, marketing side of things, we look at, let's say, encouraging people going to stadiums. We understand that transport is a major item to somehow discouraging people from going to games. If one looks at, let's say, the grant money that they're getting, I think maybe it's something that needs to be revisited by the PSL in saying, listen, you will be getting, instead of the 2.5 that you were getting, you'll now be getting 2. The other 5 will go into marketing for attendance into games. Because, you know, stadium attendance is linked to sponsorship for clubs. That means the PSL, or let's say clubs participating in the PSL that are not part of the Big 4, the Big 6 or whatever, will continually struggle in the PSL because they can't attract sponsorship, because the stadiums are forever empty apart from them playing Sundowns, Chiefs or Pirates. And we constantly hearing stories. It's either it's Celtics, it's Polokwane City, it's State Stars, it's Black Aces. So there's always a club that's in financial crisis that you'll have somebody come and buy status and all that. That's something that's unheard of in the Barclays or all the other European or top leagues in the world. So for us to have a sustainable PSL, marketing of stadium attendance, it should be something that's a priority, like it was back in the day, where it was a priority for clubs to market the fans to go to stadiums. Let's say, for instance, the 500,000 goes into a club hiring local buses to take local people to go to the games and watch. Because I'll look at let's say the Gussie Life. Gussie Life is, you find these Easter tournaments, or you find just people playing, and you do find people that actually go and watch. They go and watch because it's nice watching a live game. Yes, it's nice watching a game at your comfort of your home and a couch and all that, but it's a different experience altogether to go to the stadium and watch the game. And once that culture changes in South Africa, where it's being encouraged, and you're saying, listen, there's buses. Now, that's what I'm saying locally. Let's look at, let's say, Lamontville Golden Hours, right?
Yeah.
In Lamontville, what you do is people in Lamontville, even though you do find that others support Chiefs or others support Sundowns or whatever, but there's still people from Lamontville. Now you have buses locally that can take people to go watch the game. Pay $10, and you say kids go in for free. That, I think, will probably change how the game is in South Africa, because now we need to look at now the long term. We need to look at sustainability, and I think it's an easier way of going about it when the PSL just gives 2.5 million to clubs, and they're looking to basically make money from selling players or whatever. But they ignoring the other streams of revenue. Where, look, I'll give you a number now. Yeah? Looking at analyzing clubs around the world. When you look at sponsors, you're talking about 25% of the total revenue, right?
Yeah.
When you look at, let's say, TV broadcasting, you're looking at 34%. And when you look at, let's say, retail, which is another item that other clubs, apart from Chiefs, Sundowns, and Pirates, are not exploiting, where there needs to be their merchandise. How are they selling their merchandise? Is their merchandise being sold? And now when you look at ticket sales, we talk about 25%. So 25% and sponsors 25%. They're equal. So from now, obviously, some would say compare apples with apples. Ticket sales in European countries is different, where people pay top dollar for going to games. Yes, I agree with that. So maybe that is not a good comparison. But if we are heading in the right direction, where ticket sales would drastically improve the percentage of sponsorship for clubs, and I feel like it's something that they're not touching base on.
You're right in that. We do definitely have to compare apples with apples. It's a different situation. But I agree with you that there are other things and other means that the PSL and the clubs could use towards drawing more people into the stadiums, increasing interaction with fans, increasing ticket sales, and so on. The unfortunate bit is that you then have to convince the clubs to take a 500,000 rand cut in the income from the as grants. But you're right. I mean, the clubs have to be much more active and try other means and ways to get people into the stadiums. I think Sundowns when that hired buses and were moving people around. I think Sundowns not playing on the continent when they went to Congo. Anyway, I forget. But anyway, Patrice does all of these things. If you're wearing a yellow shirt, you get into the stadium for free. They do a lot more stuff to try and get people into stadiums. And I don't see it, unfortunately, at other stadiums. But unfortunately, maybe they can't afford it. The problem is we don't know whether they can afford it or not, because we don't even know what their financials look like. We don't know what they're spending their money on. And it makes that very difficult for us to say. I mean, a club like Jomo Cosmos, for instance, or Morocco Swallows should never have gone down. Those are stately clubs that have been around for years. They've got the fan bases. They've got, the pedigree. They should never have gone down. But if you don't run a club financially responsibly, you will go down. It's sad that a Morocco Swallows had to go and be propped up by the likes of Panyaza Lusufi and his business partners and so on to try and even get them back to playing. It's sad that I disagree with the ability to buy a club status. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. You should not be able to buy your way into a league, and that loophole has to be closed, in my opinion. But it's sad that clubs have to resort to selling their financials, their league status, just to be able to. I don't even know what Bloemfontein Celtics are going to do, because those are the best supported fans apart from the big three.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen to Bloemfontein Celtics fans? They're not going to have a club. They're not going to have a local club because Tim Sugwazi is going to take that license and he's going to give it to TS Galaxy, and Nqobile is going to have a PSL-based team. So the club and the clubs, the PSL, South African football as a whole, we have to look at at making football a business and not just a soccer club. And I guess they are doing it now because, I mean, you can't be making R1 billion in revenue if you're not looking at it as a business. But we have to professionalize and make these other things a lot more high level than what we are. We can't just rest on the fact that you can watch football on TV.
Yeah.
There has to be a lot more done in terms of engaging with fans and increasing the revenues for clubs individually, for the league, and for SAFA, because I mean SAFA's another one. We're not going to talk about it today, but SAFA's another one which is suffering financially, and it's a terrible state, unfortunately. But what can we say?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to dwell too much on the part about let's say marketing the game for people to go to stadium. I'll just make a statement in saying that I remember one of the Kaizer Chiefs stalwarts was talking about how back in the day it was mandatory. It wasn't even a case of a choice or whatever. So for a club to make money, they had to market the games for people to go and attend. Same way as we're looking at other European teams where part of their revenue stream is ticket sales. So a club relied on ticket sales for them to survive, right? And I think you can understand from let's say the intention of the grant, but it's almost it's enabling some form of laziness from clubs to market themselves, because if the club goes and knows that, look, part of the revenue is for us to have ticket sales, then they have to be innovative in how they convince people to buy tickets and go to the games. I think there needs to be that kind of involvement from clubs, which at the moment I feel there isn't. And like you said, this whole PSL status thing, it should totally be scrapped, because it's a season to season thing. You're always going to have a club that's struggling financially. There's a business guy who comes in who wants to buy status, and then kapoof, we have a new club in the league now, where they didn't play for it. They just basically bought it. So you can't be having such. But moving on, the announcement that the PSL made about them not having to renew their contract with ABSA. Now I would hope that the reason why that contract was not renewed is because there's probably another sponsor who is offering more money than what ABSA was offering. Hence that. But that's just me hoping that's the case. But what do you think? What do you think is the reason why ABSA has not renewed? Because they're not saying anything. They're just saying, look, it's just an end of relationship. That's it.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to speculate. I don't like to speculate on what could possibly happen, but I did do a little thread on Twitter yesterday, speculating on what I think the situation is. The contract was signed. So ABSA's been in a relationship with the PSL for 16 years. That's a long time. Personally, I don't. The banking sector has been struggling. All of the banks have been struggling for the last couple of years. It's been made even worse now by coronavirus. But this decision wasn't made now. I'm sure about a year ago, maybe the PSL knew that this contract wasn't going to be renewed. And I'm sure that they've been shopping around for another sponsor for a while. I'm sure they knew about this. It's not new. I don't want to say I'll bet that they knew about it. They'll never say that they did, but I'm very sure that they knew that the sponsorship was ending. Why? I think ABSA's been, a lot of the big banks have been pulling out of sponsorships. Standard Bank pulled out of the Cricket South Africa sponsorship. ABSA is pulling out of this one. SAA pulled out from the Blue Bulls, but I mean SAA had some problems anyway, and then MTN came in. I think sponsorship has become very difficult in this country because it's difficult to justify you sponsoring a league in South Africa when the stadium attendance is low and interaction with fans is low. It's become, and also the financial position of places like ABSA. It's not easy to just 600 million, 100 million rand a year is a lot of money to put your name on the league. And right now, I think the reason why we haven't had an announcement about a new sponsor is because we're in a situation where the PSL can't even put on games. And the government's not giving any indication as to when they'll be able to put on games. They've just said that you're allowed to train as individuals, and the clubs are allowed to train as individuals, but there's no contact training. There's no, and our cases are still going to peak. We haven't even hit the peak yet. In Europe, they only started training after the peak. In Italy, the cases started going down. Germany, cases started going down. England, cases are now starting to go down, which is why they're saying in 2 weeks' time you can start playing. But us, we're still going up. So how is it going to even be possible that we're going to be able to have a league happening before at least August? I don't know.
Yeah.
So financially speaking, it's very difficult for a sponsor to come in and say, we will give you 120 million rand a year. How do they do that when we can't guarantee when the league will be back? We have dwindling attendance records, and there's this whole tiff between SAFA and the PSL where they don't like each other also.
Yeah.
So I mean, just the mere fact that we didn't have PSL games on TV for so long. I mean, last year we had this whole situation where you couldn't watch PSL games on SABC. They were not on radio because there was a fight between PSL, SAFA, and then the SABC. So look, it's a difficult situation. But I don't know who's coming in as a sponsor. But I can speculate on who could possibly come in. But I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll just say this. It's interesting how, let's say, obviously from what you're saying, that possibly maybe the ABSA did know that they're not going to be renewed their contract. Maybe it was a parting gift when they increased their prize money to 15 million, because I was thinking about that. I'm like, why increase it to 15 million if you know that you're not going to basically carry on with the sponsorship? But anyway, we look. Obviously, I'm not going to touch on the fighting between SAFA and PSL, and it's quite evident between Danny Jordan and what you call Dr. Ivan Khoza.
Dr. Khoza.
I mean, I think we all saw that when they announced the deal of outsurance as referees, that clearly these two are fighting.
Yeah, that there's problems.
Yeah,
Yes.
But touching on, let's say, SuperSport as a broadcasting sponsor. Now, again, I look at the model that the Barclays have, and similarly to all the other European leagues, is that I think in business, it can never be a good thing if you're negotiating with one person. There needs to be another party to make it competitive. Because the fact that in England they have Sky Sports, they have BBC, they have Fox, they have ESPN,
BT.
all these teams, all these guys that are competing, and surely PSL will be able to approach BT and say, listen, how much are you willing to pay for the PSL? Because I think it would do us well when we have more than one guys bidding for, rather than a whole season, but actually bidding for games, because then that means more money.
Yeah, I think that, I'll tell you why I think that's a very difficult thing for them to do. So the way that broadcasting works is that SuperSport will pay for the rights right? Let me use SuperSport as an example. SuperSport pays for the rights to access that content and then show it on their platform. Now, the problem that the PSL has is that beyond South African borders, there's not many other nations that watch the PSL. So you can't then get broadcasters, international broadcasters coming in to say, we want your product. What the English Premier League has as a big advantage is that a lot of people like to watch the Premier League. We've been watching it on TV for years. So you then get broadcasters from all over the world. It's not just Sky and BT in England. You then get beIN Sports in France. You get DAZN Network. You get all sorts of broadcasters. Even SuperSport has to buy the rights to show football games in this country. So they then have not just one broadcaster. They've got multiple broadcasters worldwide who then feed money into the Premier League. That's why the Premier League is so successful. They work it as a business. The problem for PSL is that apart from our, the PSL and maybe Swaziland, maybe Botswana, and Namibia, Lesotho, and maybe the surrounding African countries, there's not many countries who watch PSL. So you're not going to sell broadcast rights to a BT in England. For what? Because there's not enough South Africans living in England for them to justify showing that content in England. It just doesn't make sense. However, what the PSL could do is then say, we'll open up a digital platform where we will stream the games. If you want to access that content, you have to pay to stream the games. So therefore South Africans living in England or in America or any of these other countries could then stream the games that way. And therefore you could have digital streaming platforms where people could plug into it and watch. That would make some sense. But it's difficult for them to widen the net beyond the current broadcasters that we have. Another problem that they have is that it was a government ruling that they have to show football on free-to-air TV, which basically means they have to show football on the SABC. So they were forced, essentially as the PSL, to work with the SABC as a broadcaster. Unfortunately, the SABC is broke.
Yeah.
So,
you see that look, obviously,
yeah, it makes it more difficult.
Yeah, if we're going deeper on let's say the ruling that was made about free to air, it makes it difficult for the PSL now to negotiate the contract that they're negotiating with SuperSport. Where now they're saying, well, if you're saying that this thing is a free product, then how are we supposed to be paying 600 million for this?
Exactly.
And that's why they need to change the model away from an NGO. It needs to be a business model where it's profit driven. Now, if that is the case, surely this is not Bafana Bafana. It's a business called PSL, and the government cannot come and say, look, this needs to be a free to air. It can't be like that.
But this is the problem, though, is that the PSL didn't stop, didn't go and the PSL wanted to sign the CII deal. They did sign the CII deal, and I think the PSL was looking to make more money through the CII deal, because then they would have two broadcasters. They would have SuperSport on one side, and then they would have CII on the other side, right? And that would have made a lot more money for the PSL. That made a lot of sense. But the problem is that our government came in and intervened. And I don't think change in the model will change the fact that government comes in and intervenes. Because football is a national sport, the Ministry of Sports can then say, we intervene and we want. So I personally feel like that decision was detrimental. It didn't make sense. For instance, rugby doesn't have to be shown on free-to-air TV, but it's a national sport.
Yeah.
Cricket doesn't have to be shown on. Cricket hasn't been shown on national TV like SABC since the early 2000s, and it's also a national sport. I don't understand why those rules then all of a sudden exist for football. So I think there's some political political reasoning, which basically, I think politically what they wanted to do is force the the SABC to be financially viable, and they knew that football is the biggest sport in the country, force the PSL to have the SABC as a broadcaster, and force basically money into the SABC, because you would then have people watching football on the SABC. If that hadn't happened, I can guarantee that the SABC would be gone as a broadcaster. You would not be able to watch it there, and that all of the football would solely be on SuperSport and CI. But unfortunately, those two are not free-to-air channels, and we will never know what motivated the political reason to force the PSL and the SABC to work together, because there's no other way of explaining it. That was a political decision.
So I have I have an idea. I'm not sure about its viability, or if it's something that's possible. It's now on the broadcasting thing. Now we spoke about digitally PSL exploring that avenue. Now we see what Netflix is doing to multi-choice, and is it not then an opportunity for the PSL to approach Netflix, because we know it's not only Netflix. You have Amazon, you have all different internet-based companies. Is it not then an idea for the PSL to approach Netflix, for instance, to say, listen, we have this product and over 30 million of people are watching this, and come on board. And I'm sure for Netflix, like they normally do, they come with the budget, they give a specialist who then run it, and then they get money back. Simple. Now, they get, whether it's ex-employees of SuperSport or Sky Sports, there's many specialists in this field where they can come in and basically go and have, different cameras and stuff like that, and that's more money now. That's now tapping into the internet side of things. And like you say, you have South African citizens all over the world who are now able to access the PSL as well. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that an example like that already exists worldwide. There's a network called DAZN. I don't know if you know about DAZN. It's DAZN. They own Goal.com, the football website that people know all over the world. But DAZN is a football streaming. It's an online platform, and that's what they do. They stream sports, mostly football, and they tap into, they've got broadcast rights all over the world. Unfortunately, we don't get it in South Africa, but it's available worldwide. And that, for me, that's the future of where football needs to go. You can't be limited to just your own country. If you can't sign traditional broadcast deals, then look to the likes of, for instance, Barcelona signed a deal with Facebook, where they're going to be showing content on Facebook. Facebook signed a deal with the Premier League, where they're going to be showing some Premier League games. Amazon signed a deal with the Premier League, where they're going to be showing some Premier League games. It's the future of sport. Digitization is where people are going, and the coronavirus has just made it worse. It's made it a much more, that's where people want to go. Right now, you've got things like, live this and that, Carol Shabalala talking to this person live on Instagram, all sorts of. There is no reason why the PSL should not be looking at digitizing the content and saying, okay, we'll put our own cameras up, we will stream the games, you will pay to access the stream, and we take all the revenue. That makes a lot more sense than and then you charge SuperSport as well, and you charge CI, and you charge SABC. But
you see that's the thing. I think COVID-19 has also exposed the PSL when it comes to the media presence, because you mentioned about SuperSport, where it's either it's a Carol Manana show, or it's all the other guys where they're having, either it's an Instagram live thing or whatever. You also have similar content at Orlando Pirates and the likes, but yet the PSL are just a mere account where they're just announcing or they just posting about flashback this, flashback that, and you're like, come on, guys, surely like the Barclays where they have different segments when it comes to the media presence. It's either goals of the season or goals of the decade, or it's having certain interviews with legends of Soul Club and so and look, even SABC where they go, the football goes ritual. That's a good content for SABC. But what about the PSL? What do they have that we can be like, listen, if you want exclusive this and this, you have to go to their Twitter page or their Instagram or whatever. But there's none of that. I mean, you have personalities who have more followership than the PSL itself. Players are and that should be a concern for the PSL, that nobody is lining up to follow the official Twitter page or whatever, because there's no content there. They're not tapping into that media stream.
Yeah, you're right there. I've said it for a long time that our digital market. Well, for me, I'm a digital person. That's my realm. That's where I live, and it's sad to see it. It really is. The PSL has so much. Even Safa is even worse actually. But we're not here to badmouth the organization. I think that there's a lot to learn and there's a long way to go. But digitally, they could definitely be doing a lot more. And I can definitely see how the PSL could do a lot more with the digital content that they have than what they're doing right now. I mean, the clubs themselves, if you look at an example of Orlando Pirates, they've got an app. You can go and look at the app. You can go and get highlights of with interviews from players. They do a lot more. Cape Town City is another example. They do a lot more than what the league itself is doing in terms of their digital offering. So, but again, similar to everything else, you can't tell people what to do. All we can do as fans is, hey guys, come on, can you please improve this? And if they choose not to do it, maybe some of us as fans need to start getting into those PSL structures and start forcing things from within. Because right now, I mean, there's only so much that you can do. All we can do is write our Twitter threads, put up content like this, and hope that they see it and start doing something about it.
I calculated from 2018 to 2019, PSL has a 6% growth, which, I mean, if one compares growth with other leagues in the world, it's not bad. I mean, it's a good growth. I guess obviously when one looks at it deeper in terms of the money that they're actually making, then obviously it becomes a concerning thing. To basically, I think from my side, we touched on ticket sales, that it obviously needs to be something that gets touched on. Retail, TV broadcasting and sponsors and player trading. I think those fundamentally create a financial structure for a team that is more sustainable. I believe, look, credit needs to be given to Dr. Ivan Khoza, Kaizer Motaung, and the like, who are involved in growing the game to where it is today. We can speak about them generating a revenue of 1 billion. Now, I believe that, like in any other business, there needs to be growth, and that growth also comes with having young blood and succession plan, where you have people with innovative ideas who are coming in to reinvent the business. And I feel like it's not bad mouthing them in any way, but it can't be the same individuals for so many years. I mean, the fact that in this league or in our country, where I can simply say that there's a lot of conflict of interest going on, from a chairman of the club to also being a chairman of the PSL, from being the of a club to also being the guy who looks for sponsors. And
Yeah.
We aren't surprised when, let's say, for instance, certain competitions are scrapped and there's introduction of new competitions, and then just after
Yeah.
it, then you see that there's a new sponsorship on their teams. Um,
Yeah.
then you're like, well, I mean, you don't need to be a genius to connect the dots. You can see it's right in front of you. So
Yeah.
there's definitely, I mean, let's say for instance, Kaizer Moudon in this case, who from what we
Yeah.
understand is the one that is attracting sponsors to the PSL. Now, put your shoes in Kaizer Moudon. Now you talking to this client. Now, who are you going to negotiate for first? Your club or the PSL? Because there's going to be that question. And that's why I feel like it's either they need to concentrate on the clubs or they concentrate on the PSL. Now we are very grateful of what they've done for the PSL, but for us to move on and progress, we need new people. We need people who coming up with new ideas, who are gonna look at the PSL and what is in the best interest of the PSL, not of what's in the best interest of the PSL and my club.
Well, yeah, I don't like to talk about politics of football because that stuff is problematic. For me, I agree. I think that it's difficult to make judgments on. For instance, the fact that the chairman of a club is also the chairman of the league. It's there's a conflict there. Someone was asking me, who do I think will be the new sponsor of the PSL, and someone said Motsepe must come in, and I said, yeah, but Motsepe already has a club in the PSL. How can you be the sponsor of the club? How can you be the owner of a club and also sponsor the league? There's a conflict. For me, it seems a bit difficult for me to it's difficult for me to justify. And if you look at internationally, you don't get that situation anywhere else in the world. Well, at least the big European leagues. You don't get that where the owner of a club is also on the board of the league. There's a definite conflict, and you could then say you have too many questions to ask, about what type of influence do you have. I mean, if we look at it, for example, why do the cases of Chiefs and Pirates take so long to settle when they go to DCs? And people have asked about that for a long time, and the league has never really addressed it. But and you leave yourself open to these types of questions because you then have Dr. Khoza, Mr. Moudon, their own clubs. How is it possible that they could be in the upper echelons of the PSL? It just doesn't, for me, it doesn't make that much sense. But those are the politics of this country. And yeah, that's what we have to deal with. I try not to get into the politics of football. That's why, if you look at my thread, I don't speculate on threads and stuff like that. I keep it simply to the facts, and I say, based on the facts, this is what I think needs to be done. And the facts speak for themselves. The PSL, financially speaking, the model that says we're an NPO and we don't make any profit, I don't think is the right one. But as for ownership and who runs the league and the age of people within the league, for sure, I mean, it would be great if new ideas could come in and so on and so on. That would be fantastic. But the league is what it is, and I guess we can only do as much as we can from a fan perspective. But beyond that, the administrators and the people at the top have to make changes.
Oh well, that was a mouthful. I hope people who were listening were able to grasp what you were explaining about the ongoings with the PSL when it comes to money. Any last parting shot from your side? from the discussion we've had?
No, well, I think I'm looking forward to the latest financial results. I don't know what's going to happen with the league financially, but it's very difficult for me. I think they've been making noises about potentially, well, not the league themselves. Journalists have been making noises about potentially a training camp at Sun City or non hot zone places in the country where the teams can go and train. I think that's a good start. It shows that they're intent on getting the league restarted. I think it's very difficult given the stance of government on professional sport. I mean, even golf is not allowed as a professional sport right now, and that's an individual sport. So I don't know how football would even be allowed. I think it's difficult also given our situation with COVID, that we are only really getting to the peak of our cases and we're already, we're already opening up. I mean, yeah, it just makes it very difficult. I hope that the league will be able to restart and that we finish the games in the season. Whether it's going to be possible or not, I don't know. But if it's not possible, I haven't spoken about the alternative solutions. What happens if the league doesn't restart? If the league doesn't restart, in Europe, what's happened is that the broadcasters have asked for some money back. And that would be disastrous if it happened here. In France, they had to take a loan. The league had to take a loan to pay back the broadcasters, because what happens is that the broadcasters give the league the money. The league then uses the money in advance. And the promise is that the games will be shown and that you'll get your money back through advertising revenue and through charging people to advertise during games and so on and so on. That hasn't happened in SA. We don't have games. So yeah, a loan is an alternative. In other countries, government bailouts have come through to help the league to sustain themselves. I know that the league I know that SAFA did say that that FIFA would be providing some sort of grant, but they didn't say how much. So we don't know what that grant is, how much money it is, where that money will go to, when that grant is even coming. We have no idea. And another alternative is maybe something like, a tournament held in America in the EFC. In America, actually, what they're looking to do is hold tournaments in non-hot zone places, camp everyone together in one place, put everyone in quarantine when they're not playing, and then you literally just wake up, you go and you play, you go into your hotel room, and you're there for maybe 2 months, and you play as many games as possible. That's also another alternative. But if they don't finish the league and they don't do any of that stuff, I shudder to think what could happen. It's going to be very difficult. I think we will see other clubs like Bloemfontein Celtics going down because financially they can't survive. And that's basically all I have to say on the. That's the only other thing I would have wanted to say is that financially speaking, it's very, very, very difficult for these clubs to survive. They don't release their financials, but we can just see examples from Europe and African countries that they can't sustain it on their own.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Nqobile. Look, I think for obviously the viewers, can you please just tell them about your handle so they can catch you on Twitter, Instagram, and all that, so they can follow you?
For my professional or for my football-related content, everything is on my Twitter handle. I don't currently put any of my stuff anywhere else apart from Twitter, so they can find me they can search for Nqobile Ndlovu on Twitter, or they can search for my handle, which is Turkish Nabs. That's TURKISHNABS. TURKISHNABS. They'll find everything that I speak about. I'm currently working on my website where I'm going to be doing a lot more of this type of stuff, and maybe a podcast where I'll try and make this stuff a little bit less complicated, you know. Financial matters are not really easy to understand. It takes a bit of time to research it. But yeah, that's where they can find me.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Thank you, Nqobile, for joining us and giving us an insight on the breakdown on what was reported by the PSL. Well, guys, I hope that was insightful. And you know it. I mean, look, at Football Stalkers, we bring the content, we bring all these segments for you to understand every aspect of the game. Look, you can comment. You know where you can find us. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You can even comment on the YouTube page. It's the Master Tactician fan signing out. You know it. You know it. Cheers, guys. Cheers.